Wednesday, long Wednesday. Hey, shake it up now.
Remix.
It's Long-Winded Wednesday. We're here today.
Hey.
Talk about sexism every day. But today we decided to make it part of this thing so we can bring it up with everything else. Okay, that was all you're going to get.
Okay, it's up, it's on.
It's up, it's on?
I see it.
How's the sound?
Oh, I have. Yeah.
It's pretty good? Okay. Hello, everyone. It's Long-Winded Wednesday. Today we're talking about the topic of
Not racism.
You thought.
Well,
we're
still intersect.
I know. We're not talking about race at all today. No. It will come up because we're talking about a different ism today, which is sexism. So, hello, my name is Jenny Medrano. I use she, her, and hers pronouns, and I am the Shift Program Manager.
Hi, I'm Marin. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Shift Program Coordinator.
So we are here and pretending that we live in this beautiful apartment, but it's a Zoom background. JK, it's our actual apartment. We are not social distancing because we live in a pod. We're a household pod.
Yes. We are roomies.
Roomies, yes. So typically we like to start off with like a little bit of breathing and a check-in, and I was too rushed last time, so I think that we should try to do that this time.
Oh, wow.
This mic closer.
Yeah. I think we're learning even just in general around business and working and on Zoom and all the calls, like the continued ways we get swept up in capitalism and productivity and all the things.
Not taking a break.
Oh, there's a chickadee in our bird feeder. That's really happy, y'all. See, take a moment to be in gratitude.
That brings her a lot of joy. To me, it's just a bird, but hey, everybody has their own things that make them happy. And I just had sashimi for lunch, so that made me happy. Because you can buy tuna steaks at Sprouts, cut it up, and you got your own sashimi. Pro tip. So let's start with a check-in. What is one thing that you do to help yourself pause and relax?
What is? Trying to get away from a screen has been really important. It's been very hard. I was laying on the floor last night, covering my eyes with rice, and yet I still couldn't stop watching TV or being on my phone.
Sleep. I was like, my eyes hurt. Let me watch a show.
Sleep was really good. Trying to get sleep. This is the basics. Trying to get sleep. Trying to make sure I'm drinking some water, and trying to get outside. And also reminding to just breathe. We're humans. How about you?
For me, I feel like a bit of self-care is just like, I don't know, like working from home. In our organization, you can pretty much wear whatever you want. So every now and then, I'm like, let me wear these other clothes that I have. And that makes me feel good. Fashion makes me feel good. And then taking time to just sit and do nothing, also not looking at screens. I have to remind myself to do that. So today we're talking about the topic of sexism, which we don't usually talk about directly. We definitely weave it into everything. And I know the last time we chatted about our process of looking for housing, it came up, and just how we were treated as two women looking for a place together versus like a heterosexual couple of man and woman, or two men. So I guess what I'm wondering about is, how has sexism showed up in your life recently?
Yeah. Well, I feel like we might need to add something in this too. Someone just mentioned the news around Breonna Taylor right now and the indictment or lack of.
Oh,
yes. Sharing that as a Black woman, hearing the news about Breonna Taylor has myself and my entire community in deep mourning. So I don't know, more just want to name that. And that also ties into sexism and the intersection of race and sexism around who gets acknowledged in terms of after death. And I don't know, that feels very complicated, but just want to share that is on people's hearts and minds right now.
Yeah.
Today.
Thank you. And who is it?
It's Bianca.
Bianca, thank you for sharing that and engaging with us and putting that here. Like I would hope that there just could be a space, whether it's in person or online, that we could talk about real stuff and what's going on and everything that's happened or not happened around Breonna Taylor. It's just like, I feel like I am a woman of color, but also a non-Black woman of color. And I realized more and more, I've realized a lot this year. I've learned a lot this year in just terms of how much privilege I do have. And from my perspective, it feels like Black women have always been supportive of me and of many people of color and doing the most for all of us. And then it seems like on the flip side, that rarely ever happens for Black women. And when I think about the Latinx community, it's like, well, there's so much anti-Blackness within it that we're wrestling with. But then, like, I think sometimes because I try to operate in a way of like, let's support each other as women of color, I assume that everyone's going to be like that. But I've definitely met Latinx people, have Latinx family, Latinas in my life where it's like they have their prejudices and the racism that's keeping them from really going that extra mile when one of us gets thrown under the bus, especially a Black woman in a workplace. So, yeah, it's just like, it's fucking ridiculous that it hasn't gotten the attention or justice. How do you wrestle with the news around Breonna Taylor as a white woman?
Yeah, I mean, I think I feel all sorts of conflicted right now, like coming in and like not have necessarily seen that yet today, the news around her case, and like the conflict of it's the two of us sharing and we only have our perspectives to share around this, and sexism in general. And yeah, I don't want to like move fast forward or like ignore it. Like I want to be in the midst of acknowledging what today and the lack of indictment. I think I saw quickly that there was only one officer charged in some sort of way. So one, feeling like my lack of ignorance of really what has happened today. Two, acknowledging the depth and the breadth of what mourning could look like and allowing myself to tap into that, but also not get wrapped up in any sort of, like, not for too long get wrapped up in guilt or shame around that, but another fuck right here. Here's a reminder of why it's important that I, as a white person, am thinking of myself as a racialized being, that I am engaging with multiple perspectives and acknowledging the weight of the news today. So there's emotion too.
Yeah, thanks for naming that. And I feel like in all the long-winded Wednesdays that we've done, we try to keep them going through most of the summer. I mean, there was so much happening around the Black Lives Matter movement that was just more and more apparent to me, to us, like, how do we acknowledge this and talk about this while also acknowledging that we are not Black, and yet we're doing this space and having a mic and having a voice right now. And yeah, I think it was like great to have Amanda with us last week and have her perspective. And we want to be doing more of that in terms of bringing guests in. And at the end of the day, I hope, if anything, we could demonstrate what it's like to have a real process of processing in real time. I do want to bring up, I know that it is different news, but it is news that's been on my heart and mind around RBG, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and people's different reactions towards her death.
Yeah.
And so I want to share what happened for me and see if anyone else relates. And I'd love if Mara, you could share too. How do I say this? I wouldn't say I'm super politically savvy or like have ever been super passionate about politics. And when I'm thinking politics, I'm thinking the electoral process and all that kind of stuff, and legislature and policies. And so I'm not super informed, I would say, when it comes to that. When it comes to what we do at Building Bridges, I don't even really consider that politics. Some people would, but I'm like, we're talking about our racial identities or our sexual orientation. That's just us as humans. It's not politics. That's my perspective. So when I found out that RBG passed, I can admit and say that I had no emotions around it. I did not feel any sort of connection to her. And I understand the significance of her contribution and the weight of what she's done for women. I didn't even fully understand the nuance or know the nuanced history of like her like anti-indigenousness and stuff, problematic shit. But before even knowing that, I was like, I feel really weird that I don't get what's happening in terms of the level of mourning that other women, white women I saw, feed after feed, post after post, picture after picture. And I was like, what am I missing? But then I didn't see women of color posting about it. And I was like, okay, maybe I'm not the only one.
I did have emotion, but I've also had some time to think about it. I mean, I was posting, I was sharing. I think it was another example of like still the unlearning that I still have to do around a lot of things that I'm also in disconsciousness or don't have the full information for. I also have had very peripheral experience of who she is. I think for me, more the emotion was like the accumulation of not necessarily the significance of what she has or hasn't done for quote unquote women. I've actually learned more of what people are alluding to in that, and also learning more of the problematic pieces of her true stance of white feminism and the problems of that continues to bring up, and had made in terms of how she made decisions or was a stance and a piece in power the way she was. I think for me, it was like an accumulation of more of like, I think that like the disbelief that I like tapping into the disbelief and helplessness that I felt when I first found out early on when Donald Trump was president, and I was still newly on in my racial identity and consciousness then too, of just like, the world's gonna end, everything's over sort of thing. And it's like this one person, like her death means then like XYZ is more likely going to happen than not. And so I think it was more of like a swept into that too of like, oh, we're fucked even further in some regards of just like, what are the next few months going to look like in terms of in anticipation of the election and just what Donald Trump and fascism and QAnon and all of these things continuously, I mean, not that they never were here, are just more and more like unregulated and all over the place. So I also, I mean, I'm in curiosity too, like watching a lot of even like white men in my life, like having all like this exaltation of RBG, and yeah, I'm finding myself like, oh shit, there's a lot I don't know, and here I am. Like, eat your humble pie.
Yeah, and I have a lot of thoughts going through my head, like after the fact, and I was like, I know that this isn't maybe even a fair comparison, but I did have it on my mind of the kind of mourning and respect that was paid to Chadwick Boseman when he passed, and just the hero that he was, and so much of the Black community and so many people in general, and but yet it did seem like there was this stronger or higher level of mourning and attention among Black folks that I know and people of color, and I didn't really see much posted by white people about it. It was like, yeah, that was a Marvel character, and then RBG. Not that we could compare them, but still, it was like this. She treated like she's a legend, like she's a hero, and it's like there was another. So I just couldn't help but think about that, and just how the different deaths were treated, how young Chadwick was, and I have my own thing around that, because I'm like, oh, like I lost a loved one to cancer, and it's just like, I guess there were my own emotions tied up with that one. And then even back to Kobe, there was immediate scrutiny of his life, immediate scrutiny, an immediate attack from the feminist movement. And I don't know, like part of me feels a little like sore about that. Sure. Like, just like, but it's showing what was there all along in terms of how people view different people. But also I feel like it's showing the value that's placed on a white woman's life. Versus Black men.
I think, were we talking about this at Teen Time too, of like, when is it that people are canceled? Like this whole idea too of like a legacy and an understanding, and like there's this elements of we're humans and people make mistakes, and some of them are more out in the open and they're celebrities or whatever. And so there's like, this is where intersectionality and all of it gets really nuanced and messy. And so I hear that. I hear that there absolutely is a difference. And that just continued wrestling of like, what is it to also, I mean, I'm thinking of RBG and like my own self as a white person in the nuance of that too. Like, what will people think or say of me? Some folks might not like me. There might be things that I've said or done or did that weren't okay. And like, where is, I don't know if that makes sense in the spiral I'm in right now, but.
Sorry for the loud noises. We're out here in the main space, in the main quarters of our mansion.
The patio door is open.
There's like all sorts of trucks. Sometimes there's like random people yelling and like really going at it, about to fight out there too. But anyways, yeah. Okay, so mine's in her spiral or something.
I'm in something, I don't know. I'm thinking. I'm in my thinking.
And I think, like we said, let's talk about sexism broadly, and this all relates, but I do think, I mean, we kidded about it, but like we can't not talk about the intersection of race and gender and what that looks like. That's the very reason that Kimberly Crenshaw coined the term intersectionality, because she's Black and a woman. So when I think about sexism and how it's been playing out in my life, it's weird because like I suppress that so much. Like I try not to think about it, because I just think sometimes with the daily racism that I've been experiencing, in terms of like my work and people that I interact with, I feel like I can only handle one thing. So I think I try to categorize it and just be like, it's like, honestly, I can't even think about something that happened recently, but I know things happen all the time. And we're living in an apartment now, an apartment building. And so I do feel like things happen like that in terms of like men not really respecting their space, or in the midst of COVID-19, just men not really caring if they're up in your space or not wearing a mask.
Even when at dinner last night, people walking by our obvious table and there's space and they're not.
Yeah, it was like we were eating dinner and it was like this little table that overlooked like downtown Arvada, and people could walk by, and like there was like our table, and there was all this space, right? And people were
20
like
feet.
yeah, at least. And people were walking by like
men were
like literally smelling your food. I don't know. I don't know what was happening. It was weird. And then they were coming in like these big groups they were passing by, and I was like, what is this, Mark? Like, is this a club?
It's a bra.
Is this a bro club, or is this like a literal friend group? Because like, why aren't any of them wearing masks? There's like 20 of them. So it was interesting. Does that bring up in you anything of like sexism you've experienced lately or processing?
Well, I don't know. I feel like it's connected to what you and I are constantly trying to process as well. Like, I have a very core wound around men in general, and working through sexism, and yet that's like my empathy point in some regards to understanding maybe like it's not the same, and a sliver of what you may or may not feel, and I am hearing and understanding the compoundedness of your gender and race in navigating all that you and I navigate together, and that you as the leader and you as I see you up against that all the time. It's something that I'm quick to anger to, and ultimately that it's something to I'm trying to be in constant reflection around, of just how to better handle it myself. And also it's just, really some days very frustrating. Like I had a white male email to deal with today. That just, the caucasity and the entitlement is just so real sometimes. I think for him, whether he realizes it or not, like the belief that he gets to be in whatever room or space he wants to. Like he wants to get to 301 and would be disappointed if he didn't get picked or through an application process. There's an application process on purpose. I just that superiority space, and again, like how I need to constantly remind myself to connect that to I'm not experiencing that in my racial identity.
It's like every woman, every femme, we experience men differently. Mm-hmm. And so like to the outsider who may be tuning into this, it may just seem like you're mad.
Right.
And it's like, oh, she's another angry feminist.
Yeah.
But I know you, and we've talked, and I know some of your stories, and I know some of your relationships, and some of the shit that's happened.
Yeah.
That it's like, it's hard to just shake that off. It's like it's like when you have a lot of, not only are we experiencing the daily system of oppression that is sexism, and for me, racism, but then there's these core wounds that happen along the life path that like amplify it. And so it's like even harder to get over, because it's like, well, that was traumatic and that happened to me. So now it's like, I have to deal with the daily reminders that's, I don't know, there's like this, maybe of those stories as well. Like I can think of that when it comes to racism and having moments with white people where it's like, it's hard for me not to see past leaders and people who've hurt me in their eyes. It's hard for me not to conflate them both. And I've gotten feedback from that. I'm like, well, I'm not them, and I'm not Wheaton College, and I'm not this, and I'm like, I know, like, you don't have to, I know you're not them, and yet I've been very hurt by this group of people in my life. And so it's going to take some time before I can fully differentiate.
Yes. And there's some real patterns that are existing right now that are very similar. And so I'm pausing right now. Like, I don't trust you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Do you want to share any more? I know like there's a lot that's been happening too, just feeling like race and gender in terms of being in your leadership position and being questioned.
Yeah. And yeah, I guess that's like what is confusing about it sometimes for me, because I'm like, is this happening because I'm a woman? Is this happening because I'm a woman of color? Is this happening because of both? And so I try not to get too hung up on it, but I do feel like for the most part, what I've seen with men who are consultants of any kind, they're rarely ever questioned on their technique, their strategy, their curriculum design, their advice that they provide. And for me, that's a norm. I'm more often questioned about what I'm proposing than not. And the times that I experience the least amount of questioning, it's like a graph. Like there's like, I can't even think about it. Questioning and then like gratitude or something. I don't know. But like with BIPOC spaces, it's like gratitude. Like not only tell me what to do, but thank you for creating this space. Thank you for imparting your wisdom. People twice my age are telling me this. And I'm just like, so it can't just be that I'm a woman, because if men of color twice my age are telling me this, then it's gotta be a huge part of this is race. And then, but at the same token, like many men of color, I feel like have mansplained to me. They love to mansplain to me, and that is so frustrating sometimes, because it's like you don't see your manness in this. You don't see that privilege, and that's something I've talked with a lot of women of color about. Just like the frustrating thing of like, I know I can't throw you under the bus, man of color, right now, because that's not what we do when we're in multiracial spaces. We gotta have each other's back. But you don't have my back. And like for me specifically, like Latino men, I have a great father. Like I have such a loving father. I love him, I respect him. Hardworking, immigrant, came here, now a US citizen, been a US citizen for a lot of his life. And so it's not even that I have daddy issues, I don't think. I think it's just like, it's like, but I have this thing with Latino men of like, like if you are acting in your machismo and you're not letting me speak, or you're trying to prove how awesome you are, like we're gonna have a problem. We're gonna have a problem.
Yeah, let's take a deep breath.
Yeah.
I know, like the worriness of like, oh God, we really are gonna think we're angry.
I know.
And I think it's more like, you and I were talking about this too, like just in general, what we experience, the amount of work that we're doing, the amount of different spaces that we're in, the compoundedness of like multiple facilitation spaces we're in is also like starting to be something we really need to continue to be mindful of, like what that is doing to us in general. And like, but it has been interesting. I mean, we are an all-woman facilitator team at this point, and we have started to say, like, what would it be like, and what would we actually need a male facilitator, someone who identifies as male in our spaces, because there are still elements, although we are the experts, we are the facilitators, we are there is an element of gender that shows up, and it's one of the elephants in the room that we've had to make sure we're doing in any space we're in, because there is a pattern of who speaks up first, who speaks up the most, who goes straight to credentials, who, you know, like there is an element of how like we are seeing gender play out really specifically and pretty predictably, just like white women, white people, men are very predictable as well in these spaces. And so we're all, you know, that there's that constant tension of that there's a compoundedness of experience that we're having, and also like we have men in our lives, and where do we meet that tension of like, and you're a human being and you have all this conditioning, like we understand this. Like, it's a lot.
It is, and like when we start, so it's like I brought Marin into the work that I do because at a certain point I was like, it would be really helpful to have a white co-facilitator, especially for affinity spaces, because we cannot talk about systemic oppression if we're not making space for race-based affinity groups. In the same way, it's like we need gender affinity groups, like, and that's recognizing that like I don't believe that gender should be a binary, and so hopefully we can figure out how to even navigate that better. But there needs to be a male identifying group. There just got to be one group where the detoxification can happen of toxic masculinity, patriarchy, misogyny that is showing up in real time in all these organizations, all these workplaces, in our communities. And so, yeah, I have felt that, and I like kind of hate that I have felt that at times. Like, oh God, this would have been probably easier if there was a man here, and
it's not an like easy pill to swallow.
No, and I feel like some feminists would be like, oh hell no, never. Do not say that ever. Women could do anything. Yes, you can. I understand that.
And we do.
Yes, you gotta understand our context, because at the same time, it's like we're trying to develop people in DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and a lot of what we do involves tapping into emotions.
Yeah.
So I've tried to start saying a little spiel around emotional intelligence, because I feel like I have to, for men to listen and lean into the process of naming their emotions in DEI work. Because inevitably, let's say we're talking about racism, white supremacy, guilt's gonna show up, shame's gonna show up. Those are emotions, those are feelings. And if you're not used to tapping into those, your signals are gonna get all crossed, and you're not going to understand why you're saying a certain thing or acting a certain way. And so we try to explain that emotional intelligence is foundational to DEI work in general and anti-racist work. And even one time I mentioned that some other male consultant that I know taught me this, because I felt like that was going to give me kudo points or credentials. And
yeah, we've even been framing that differently too, of like, and get curious about women telling you to tap into your feelings and what you might think about that, like that it's too woo-woo or that it's not for you. And if you're in this work, emotions are a huge piece to it.
Yeah, we're not robots. We're not just doing this. And I say it every single time that now it's like pretty much second nature to say, white supremacy has cut us off from our bodies, and it teaches us head up here. That's all that matters, and this does not, and that makes us sick. It literally leads to a lack of disease inside of us. It leads to us being super imbalanced in terms of value on the rationale, value on logic, no value for emotions, no value for intuition. It just doesn't make sense. It's not holistic.
Yeah. And I think too, I feel like I wrestle with this all the time. Like, this is the work that we're really passionate about doing. I'm so grateful to be in these spaces and in these rooms. And with different identities, though, the more patterns and the more predictability we see play out in different groups and different people, it's harder to sludge through, to be in loving accountability and meet people where they're at, like to remember and remind myself again, like, this is the work I want to do, this is what I'm here for, and this person's over here, and that's okay. And also, what's coming up in me? What do I need to release? It's okay. That's why we use like neutrality, y'all.
Saved our life. It saves our life on a daily basis.
On the daily.
Yeah.
Anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just.
And it's not just a facial expression. Like, we always tell people that we're going to have this facial expression of the whole time. And it's like, as facilitators, in the beginning, I used to take it personally if people interpreted me as cold or like a bitch. And especially as a woman of color, I was like, great, I'm trying to be friendly here. But now I'm like, oh, this is protection. And it's not just happening in my face. Like my whole body is doing everything in its power to remain neutral right now and to kind of keep my humanness out of the equation a bit. I know that that's not really possible, but like to a certain extent, because you're paying me as a facilitator to guide the group, like if I bust out in tears or I start to get really mad or emotional, like it's gonna influence the rest of the group. So I view it as my responsibility to hold back a bit to make space for everyone else and be holding their energy. You know, talk about that. Like what's happening in terms of your energy as you remain neutral and what you're doing with the energy.
I specifically try to use the energy tools that I have in terms of just thinking of different ways to release it. So yeah, like I consider like letting it go into the earth, or I put it into a rose, or I explode it. There's different ways that I just like in my head visually, like if y'all knew what was happening in my head sometimes around energy, it would be fun. But yeah, there is an element of, and I think you and I both trying to remind ourselves and each other too, what Reese Dominican has said around just like, how can we be calm bodies for the people in the space that we're in? But I feel like a lot of conversations in general that you and I've had is around sexism and internalized when we're with other women
Yes.
leaders and trying to figure out what is the best route of like, is this a boundary we need to hold? How do we, like, what is our action going to do for that other leader? And really trying to, again, like, is this our internalized sexism of like bending or doing something that we don't really want to do? So we're constantly trying to check in that too, of like, what have we internalized and think we're supposed to be doing because we're women and because we want to be nice or kind or be seen as amenable or professional. That word professional has been something we've been wrestling with too.
Yeah, if y'all think that like working to dismantle and uproot systemic oppression is our job and like outside of it, like we're just doing life, like it's the opposite. Dismantling, uprooting systemic oppression is our lifestyle. And then it just happens to be our job as well. Like we're always thinking about these things. We're always trying to decondition. And that's just focusing on a couple identities, dude. Like I try to bring in ableism as I can, citizenship status as it pops up. Rarely think about religion, rarely think about sexual orientation, to be honest, rarely think about ability, like, well, I said ableism, but like there's so many different things at play. And that's actually one question that came up for me right now is like, I know I'm talking about the compounded oppression of being a woman of color, but like, what does it mean for me to be an able-bodied woman? What does it mean for us to be able-bodied women? What does it mean for us to be documented women? I think speaking to the documented piece, like what I have seen among family and friends is, you know, as women, we already have to carry, I already have to carry so much shame, guilt, internalized conditioning to submit to people, to men. But then when you add on the layer of being undocumented, what I have seen from cousins, from family, from my stepmother is like an added shame that's like palpable, like I'm not meant to be here. I did something wrong. Even if it's like you came here as a baby. And that really breaks my heart because it's like, you have to do it. And then it's like many of them are Latinas. So it's like you have to deal with so many compounded oppressions right now. And it kind of makes my life look easy. Yeah. And the constant like reminders of things. And I think that's why I just posted that on Facebook the other day of like, yes, vote and it's good. And be mindful of how you flaunt it, because it's like, I've heard that from people and from cousins and from students that we've worked with of like, people just don't think about how often they're like, well, you should just travel. Like, why don't you just fly to Europe with us? Or why don't you just, are you going to drive or am I going to drive? Like, assuming that you have a driver's license, assuming that you have the right to vote, assuming that you have the right to travel, like, all of that is such a privilege. Is it one? It's 1:19. Oh,
It's
man,
all
we're over time.
Yeah, well, we were late again. It's all right. This is perfect timing.
Okay. Well, you got a checkout question for us?
Oh gosh. Oh golly gee whiz.
Put you on the spot there.
Yeah. My Minnesotan came out. Oh gosh.
Minnesota. Why do we have so many Minnesota ones?
I don't know. I feel like, do you want to do affirmations?
Oh, okay. We didn't do that. Oh, yeah, let's do it. Let's do two each.
Feeling love. Build each other up.
Affirm my friend, Maren.
How can I affirm my friend Jenny? Okay. Well, first of all, fucking love you, and I feel like I've said it before, but I wouldn't, like at this point in time, to think of, I think COVID brought this questioning around what it is to maybe live together or not live together and be like individualism, and it like was very much ready to be by myself, and I think you and I both were at one point, and I don't know, just to feel like I had someone that I could navigate living together and all the complexities. Like there's just so much, y'all, that we work together, we're friends, we're colleagues, we're navigating all the different identities that we hold, and I'm just so grateful to feel held and seen by you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I feel like you've heard this a couple of times in the past couple weeks about how you're able to hold your emotions. But I think that in living with you, even a short amount of time, I feel like I see it more fully and I experience it more fully. And it's like we're maybe being nearest to each other in a way. And I just like so admire it and like want to learn from you. How do you be mad? Show me how to be mad and be okay being mad and not try to get out of it. How do you be sad? Like if I hear Maren crying in her room, I'm like, wow, that's like she's able, not that I can't, but like you're able to tap into your emotions, and you do it like you show people, you show women that like that's strength.
Yeah.
And I feel like I don't know how you've learned to navigate it and like roll with them, but I feel like you do a lot of integration around them as well. And then it's like you show up the next day and I don't even know what you did. Like you worked on some Akashic records or something, and then you're like, my body is healed from that thing. And I'm like, oh, to me, like I reflect on the thought for 45 minutes in my room, and that's how I integrate. But it doesn't really happen. So anyways, this is a long affirmation, but I love and appreciate how you tap into your emotions. Thank you. You're welcome. Okay, that's it for today, y'all. And next week we will be on again at 12:30. As you can see, we didn't really figure out a topic, so we're just talking about what feels good on that day. October we'll have a new theme and topic. See y'all later.
You know us.